On Ash Wednesday, this past Wednesday, a day of fasting and abstinence, after the evening Mass, a student and I were talking, and he said, "Gosh, I'm hungry." He'd been fasting all day. And then he made this comment. He said, "I oftentimes go almost the entire day without eating when I'm studying and don't even really realize it. But when I actually have to fast, it's so hard. Why is that?" And I thought he's right. I can think of when my good friend Father Justin and I, we would spend our days off fly fishing in southern Idaho. You know, we'd get up and eat like a banana and fish all day. It'd be fine. We'd never stop. No big deal. But I have to fast for 10 minutes and I can barely make it. Somehow our interior motivation comes into play in certain things, doesn't it? That is, that there's a real attachment inside the human psyche and our heart for three things: for pleasure, for power, and for honor. These are the things that Jesus went into the desert to purify himself of, to reset his consciousness. And those are the very things that the devil tempted him with: against pleasure, being satisfied, against being powerful, and being shown honor. Now, there's nothing wrong with those things in and of themselves, but the trouble is we as humans, we just can't get enough. Like eating, there's nothing wrong with eating, but too much cake is not good. We all know that. We all know what it's like when we eat too much sweets, don't we? But what about other parts of our lives? What about too much of other things? We don't feel its effects quite so easily. So Jesus gives us the model of being detached from these things, and I believe that what it can do for you and for me is it resets our moral compass. It resets our conscience. Because we can become desensitized to these things. You've heard that word before, being desensitized to them? I want to give an example of how I have become very desensitized. When I was in seminary early on, during Lent, I decided to do kind of I don't know what you would call it. I was going to do something pretty severe, okay? What I decided to do was I wanted to see how desensitized I'd become in my own life. And so I decided to eliminate all media from my life. I wouldn't watch any movies unless they were rated G. I wasn't going to watch any television. I wasn't going to listen to any music unless it was like classical music or Christian music. I wasn't going to read anything, right? Kind of extreme, huh? Read anything unless it was based in our faith. So I decided to do that for an entire year. I began in Lent. I was going to do that for a year. I was going to go out into the desert and cut myself off from the world, so to speak. 9 months into that, so I didn't make it a whole year, 9 months into that, we watched a movie at the seminary. Every Friday at the seminary, we have movie night, just to kick back and relax, right? Now, I'm the only one doing this little project. And they brought in my favorite movie. I hadn't watched hardly any movies with them. They brought in my favorite movie, Braveheart. I am William Wallace. Before I had gone to seminary, that was my favorite movie. I'd went to the theater 3 times. I'm not a big theater guy, but that movie was my favorite. But I've been 9 months into my desensitizing project. My favorite movie rolls into town. Oh, so I stepped out of the cave and I go to watch Braveheart. And this is what happened. It absolutely shocked me. My favorite movie, as I'm now watching it 9 months into my program, I couldn't watch it. It made me sick to my stomach. The amount of violence that was being portrayed there, my insides were turning. This was my favorite movie. What's wrong with me? I had become resensitized, and I had sort of reset my natural settings, and my consciousness, my moral compass said, holy cow, blood squirting on the screens, heads falling off, not falling off, they were helped off. Now, I'm not judging anybody who watches these, but I realized in myself how desensitized I had come. I left the movie, and I felt kind of ill. And it reminded me of a time when I had felt equally ill at the sight of something. It took me back to when I was 12 years old. When I was 12, I remember this day very well. The neighbor was a couple years old, and I was super cool. And we used to hang out a lot. And he was like, hey, want to come over? My parents are gone. Want to watch a movie? Sure, I'll watch a movie. We go inside, and he says, I found this movie in my dad's closet. And it was the first time I had watched something pornographic. And I can remember feeling absolutely sick. I went home after that and I laid on the sofa. And my mom was like, are you okay? And I said, I don't feel good. I felt horrible. We're not made for those kinds of things. But hang around it long enough and it becomes okay. We become desensitized to all kinds of things, don't we? Jesus moves into the desert to become detached and resensitized to what it means to be a human being. And thus, when Christ enters into his ministry, he is so perceptive of people's needs. He's so perceptive of people's brokenness. And he is right there to love and care for them. Because everybody else is pretty desensitized to it. Just stone her. What are you desensitized to? I think as a culture, we're pretty desensitized to a lot of things. I named just a couple. Now, I'm not pointing my finger at everything in our culture, but I am at some. So I want to invite some of you to take on the desensitizing challenge. Maybe not for a whole year, but how about 40 days? And just see what happens. What would happen if you got out of that climate and environment for 40 days? And then when you jump back in, you realize, wow. I notice that when I'm driving. I like to listen to books and sometimes music when I'm driving. And the longer I'm driving, the more I have to turn up the radio. Then I stop for gas, and I leave my radio where it's at. You ever do this? And you get back in your car, and you turn it on, you're like, whoa, it's so loud. It's exactly what I'm talking about. It's exactly what I'm talking about. We become very desensitized to the point where we even crave some of these things. Yeah. I watched a clip of The Walking Dead the other day. It's just normal now, isn't it? It's just normal. Or is it? Is that normal? 40 days. I offer you the Lenten desensitizing challenge. Reawaken your spiritual lives. Reset your moral compass. I offer that to you. Jesus did it, and it's a very good thing to do. And my guess it'll make you and me, and I need to do it again too, because I easily get sucked back in, right? We're a part of our culture. But my guess is if you and I really did this, we would end up much more kind, merciful, but at the same time, just. And we would work very hard to make this world a more just place.